I think we'll certainly see some people who get deported on student visas. Joe Biden left this economy in a disaster. This is not fundamentally about free speech.
Let's cover a few clips of JD Vance trying to do damage control on Fox News from the horrendous first few weeks or months of this Trump presidency, as they can't even promise you no recession at this point. So be sure to like this video. It helps us out a ton, helps the channel grow, and let's hop right into this with our fact checks ready.
Laura, a green card holder, even if I might like that green card holder, doesn't have an indefinite right to be in the United States of America, right? American citizens have different rights from people who have green cards, from people who have student visas. And so my attitude on this is this is not fundamentally about free speech. And to me, yes, it's about national security, but it's also more importantly about who do we, as an American public, decide gets to join our national community. And if the Secretary of State and the President decide this person shouldn't be in America and they have no legal right to stay here, it's as simple as that.
Do you see more such deportations happening?
I think we'll certainly see some people who get deported on student visas if we determine that it's not in the best interest of the United States to have them in our country. So yeah, I don't know how high that number is going to be, but you're going to see more people.
There is so much wrong with this that it's scary. Free speech, like all constitutional rights, applies to all persons. This is why the Constitution says persons, not citizens, and it's why Supreme Court case after case supports even non-citizens having constitutional rights, like due process, like free speech, like the same ones as anyone else. And I can assure you, the group of people trying to say, hey, these constitutional rights only apply to some people in this country are always the bad guys, i.e. slavery. And we're talking about someone here who is now being deported that was a permanent resident here legally, came legally, had been here for years, broke no crimes, isn't having due process, went to school here more, was assimilated, is now having his life uprooted because he protested something that the president disagreed with, which to keep in mind, the president disagrees with because Miriam Adelson pays him like $100 million every time he campaigns. And JD Vance is saying there will be more students deported like this, and that the president and the Secretary of State alone should decide that. And like, one, what's democratic about that? Two, notice how due process was never mentioned by this guy. This is literal dictator level stuff.
Looks like the president might slap some retaliatory tariffs on Europe. Europe came back to us and said, oh, no, we're gonna hit your whiskey. Trump then says, we're gonna up you. It's like a game of chicken here, trade chicken. 200% on champagnes and wines to France. Now that will destroy the French winemaking business, but they've been really tough on our winemaking industry for years.
Well, that's exactly the point. Look, Europe doesn't have the cards here. As President Trump likes to say, when you have actually penalized American companies and American workers, as the EU has for years, we're actually fighting back for the first time. But Laura, we have a $1 trillion trade deficit. We absorb
largest
all
ever.
The terrible economic policies from all over the world, and the world expects American consumers to foot the bill for their workers and their businesses, and Donald Trump is flipping that on its head.
This kind of talk makes my mind hurt. I don't get how it's on national television by the vice president. Nonetheless, tariffs aren't something that you do that's like, well, they did it to me, so I'm gonna do it back to them. Like, the only way that this makes sense to me is if Trump and Vance legitimately still think tariffs are paid by the foreign country, like they weren't just saying it on the campaign trail, that they actually think this. So like America is paying for the tariff that other countries put on, so now we have to get them back and make them pay. And that's obviously just not how tariffs work. If you want to know why we have a trade deficit, a big reason is because Trump ignored infrastructure investment. Most Republicans ignore infrastructure investment in favor of tax cuts. So our ability to manufacture things like steel, like that have multiplicative effects, like other things as well, is far below these other countries. If we're talking agriculture, environment plays a large part into it, but there's also problems with like subsidization of farms and other things that are largely ignored by conservatives. But the idea that the solution is revenge tariffs is insane. There's no economic theory here. It's just, well, now we're even.
As the president has said, a recognition that we have to accept, which is that, look, Joe Biden left this economy in a disaster.
I don't get how long they're going to try to sell this as all Joe Biden's fault, and there's just not much we can do, especially when we all remember that they were promising to fix it on day one. Fix it before they got in office on some of the problems. Wages were massively up when Joe Biden left. Inflation was under 3% and dropping. It was nearing 2% when Joe Biden left. Border crossings were down lower than they were when Trump left office, when Biden left office. We were more energy independent than any country in history when Biden left office. Our manufacturing numbers were through the roof. They dwarfed Trump's when Biden left office. Unemployment was consistently low. And what metric could you even say that they were handed a disaster? The vibes? Like, yeah, the vibes were bad. The only economic strains that people were feeling were the strains of capitalism. And I can't stress that enough, especially after a pandemic with our markets consolidated around corporations who engage in price gouging. It didn't matter what party was in office, as long as capitalism, we were going to feel those effects. If anything, Biden's policy steered us out of it to the best of our ability while under a capitalist framework, but we see the drop off now on how things could have been already in these kind of little areas with the market, with prices still going up, with Trump since he came in, because we just see they don't have any solutions. Their strategy is still blame it on Biden until they can't anymore.